everyone, my name's Sam, and I want you to do me a favor. Think of one word to describe yourself. Go ahead, I'll give you a second. Got it? Cool? All right, now do me a favor. Think of why that word may have come to mind. I'm going to guess that while you're thinking it through in your head, odds are that word came to mind because of an interaction you had with another person. Maybe, for example, someone came up to you and said, "I think that you're smart." And from then on, you thought you were smart, and that changed the way you thought about yourself. That's totally normal. In fact, self-concept is a concept within communications that basically is who we think we are. And inevitably, it is influenced by the interactions that we have with other people. That is normal. Identity regulation is a concept within the realm of organizational communications that uses this influence or this power to its advantage. Now, like many of you, I do have experience with identity regulation in organizations. For example, being on a sports team with a position, or the idea of teamwork invading my mind, or having a job with a job title that comes with certain responsibilities that are meant to regulate my identity. That's totally normal. Pretty common form of identity regulation. So it was a concept created by two European management scholars by the names of Mats Alvesen and Hugh Wilmot. And basically they say that organizations use this power to create members. Now keep that in mind. We're going to go through three things in this presentation. We're going to talk about the 9 different ways that identities can be regulated. We're going to talk about improper use of identity regulation and the potential consequences of abusing this power. So, what is identity regulation, Sam? Let me tell you. According to our textbook, Organizational Communication, Balancing Creativity and Constraint by Eisenberg and a couple of other authors, identity regulation is, quote, several specific practices that organizations use to make members' identities and that work to articulate how and in what ways differences among members will be valued. That is from page 200. Now, to put it in a more listed format for those of you who think in lists, Alvesen and Wilmot's, have those 9 different ways I talked about. Those 9 different ways you can regulate identities are the following. Define a person directly, define a person by defining others, provide specific vocabulary of motives, promoting specific morals and values, providing specific knowledge and skills, fostering group categorization and affiliation, reinforcing hierarchical dynamics, establishing and clarifying a distinct set of rules of the game, and by defining the environment. Nice and easy concepts, just put into a nice listed format for us. Thank you, Alvesen and Wilmot. So the way that identity regulation impacts communication, that can be seen in another textbook I found called An Introduction to Organizational Communication by Punani, Carter, and Wrench of 2012. Basically, they say identity regulation is, quote, accomplished as management promulgates a discourse that defines identity and thus shapes processes of identity formation and change. Basically what they're saying is management or people in positions of power are able to use identity regulation within their communication with their subordinates. Now let's see this in action. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with NBC's hit TV show, The Office, but basically it is a TV show set in an office setting with a team of salespeople for a paper company called Dunder Mifflin in Scranton, Pennsylvania. One of those salespeople is Dwight K. Schrute, played by the lovely Rainn Wilson. He is a very dedicated and egocentric paper salesman. He spends a lot of his time reminding his coworkers or his peers of their inferiority to him. So in episode 24 of season 7 of The Office, Dwight is given the title of acting manager after the office's real manager suffers a health emergency. So Dwight has wanted to manage this branch for a very long time, and when he gets the chance, he goes full-on authoritarian. So he regulates his subordinates' behaviors with a bunch of controlling policies, such as changing their legitimate sales and accounting position titles to junior employee, staggering their lunch breaks with one another to avoid socialization, keeping the content of meetings between he and higher-level managers secretive, and my favorite, wearing a gun around his waist, a loaded gun on a holster. Eventually, in this episode, the gun goes off, nobody gets hurt, but Dwight does lose his job. So in this scene, Schrute uses the most extreme form of identity regulation, and it's inappropriate and demeaning and just manipulative in general. And this is not what Alvesen and Wilmot intended the concept to be used for. So because managers like Schrute exist, Dwight K. Schrute, it's important to evaluate the benefits and disadvantages of utilizing this within an organization. So specifically, Schrute, like I said, went the authoritarian route, which caused a lot of negatives. The only positive was Schrute was able to maintain the power that he had as acting manager for the time being. Once that gun went off, he was out. Nobody else benefited from it. The regular employees, in fact, had a lot of disadvantages and were fairly unhappy in the workplace because of Schrute's excessive regulation. So, like I said, some negatives aside from the issues that regular employees had. Schrute eventually led himself to his own downfall. He was fired. Taking control like that is not tolerated in the workplace nowadays. So in conclusion, Alveston and Wilmot's identity regulation can be both beneficial and detrimental in practice. And hopefully now, I hope you guys can recall the 9 ways identities can be regulated. I hope you can understand why Mr. Schrute lost his job so quickly. And I hope you can understand the benefits and disadvantages of using identity regulation in different contexts. And most of all, now I hope that if you ever encounter a manager like Mr. Schrute's, think twice before your interactions with them define yourself. Thank you. Have a good one.